do we think we want to start in a bit?
Yep, the floor is all yours, and I'll continue to let folks in.
I think, Andrea, you're the chair. I don't want to overstep boundaries.
I don't know how I got to be made
You're
chair.
the chair now? Okay,
We'll just keep
start
it
off
informal. Yeah, go ahead.
if you want. Hi, everyone. I'm Nadia Brown, and this is the MCOPES 2022 publishing panel. And I have the distinct pleasure of being the lead editor of Politics, Groups, and Identities. And I'm joined today with colleagues from the National Black Politics Review. Co-editor is Andrea Gillespie at Emory University. And Valeria Sinclair Chapman, who is on the team, the editorial team of APSR, American Political Science Review. Political Science Review will be joining us shortly. So this is a space where we can really just ask and answer questions about publishing. And I can talk a little bit, I think both through PGI, MBPR, we'll talk a little bit about like what publishing in our journals look like, and then just bigger questions, I think, about the field of how do you publish Black politics research. And another side hat that I wear is through the Monkey Cage. And I'm also happy to talk with you about publishing in the Monkey Cage and really soliciting pieces from, and both, yeah, I see Jonathan is here. Andrea's published in the Monkey Cage. You got to get Corey and two others, hi Claudia, to publish in the Monkey Cage, because we really do need to diversify that space and what kind of knowledge is accessible, political science knowledge is accessible to Washington Post readers. So unfortunately, I am double booked. I'm on a Western panel in about 15 minutes. So I'm going to start first, and then Andrea will take over, and Valeria will join as soon as she's able to. So PGI is a journal of the Western Political Science Association that recently received an impact factor. We're in the top third percentile of all journals in all journals. I'm just saying like all journals, not just political science journals. So our rankings, we just got this ranking number and we really hit it out the park. So we are ranked above many more established journals like APSR, like Politics and Behavior. And some of that is because of our engagement. Oh gosh, did you guys hear that? I'm sorry. Okay. I have kids who are waiting for Brian, my dad, to take them to the park, and they're just doing all the things while he's finishing up a work thing to take them to the park. So if you hear lumps and crying, that's my house. All right, so much of what we do in PGI is, again, like it sounds, politics, groups, and identities. So if you're doing any kind of work in politics, little p politics, defined in any sort of way, on people, marginalized groups, or people with marginalized identities, that is the journal for you. We have a majority focus on American politics, American politics essays. That's primarily what we published. About 44% of what we published last year was American politics. 34% of what we published was comparative politics. And then a smaller percentage of theory and IR. That's probably less a surprise to you that there's not that many people who are doing, particularly in Black politics, right, are doing theory and IR. Not to say that we shouldn't be there. We are. It's just smaller numbers than there are in American politics and comparative politics. What makes PGI unique, I think, is our editorial model, where we have a large editorial team. So I'm the lead editor. I process all the manuscripts, but I hand them off to what we call coordinating editors, or CEs, which are like associate editors at other journals, who are closer to the subject area. So if you've done a piece on LGBTQ politics, I'd pass that off to Melissa Michelson. If you've done a piece on comparative studies in women in Europe and Latin America, you would go to Jen Piscopo. If you're doing work in public, like big data, public opinion stuff and racial ethnic politics here in the US, you would go to Ray Block. Right. So you know these names of these scholars because they are leading scholars in the field. And so they get a first crack at your manuscript, and then they send it off to reputable reviewers that they are intimately aware of. Right. So we have quick turnaround quickest turnaround times on our reviews. They're going to expert associate editors or CEs, and they come back to me as the lead editor. And I typically tend to agree with the final decision that one of the CEs has made on a manuscript, and I push that through. So the benefit again of PGI is that you have people that are mostly closely related to your own topic looking at your work. It's not, we know who the people are and who to send them to, and we have experts in-house who are already looking at your work. Another reason to publish with PGI, we are an incredible social media team, right? So we push out your work. We talk about your work when it's politically relevant. So if there's something happening in the news that's tied to the things that we published in our journal, we push that out. And that has had a great success rate in boosting people's impact factors, their H index, because we're driving eyes to the scholarship. So we have higher citation rates, again, something that other journals just don't have at this point. I think we're at like 38 of citations, and our nearest per article, that's the average, the mean, 38 citations. And the nearest journal to us is Political Behavior, and they're at 17, right? So there's a big, big gap. And I think, right, it's what we're doing through the social media team that is led by Zain Urab. They are amazing. I can't give them enough flowers. They just have done an incredible job. But the other thing that this does is it puts us on the radar of policymakers and news, editors, journalists who want to find out information from political scientists. So if you're a scholar who cares about public facing research, or not just writing for the ivory tower and trying to get, you do that too, right? But you're also thinking about how your work has a broader impact outside of the discipline, we are a home for you. Some of the, I'll share that I am rolling off of this position in December. There will be a new team that takes over. I know that the Executive Council at the Western voted to approve the search committee's recommendation for the new team. I don't know if the new team has been contacted yet, so I won't share the new team with you here. But if they accept, they are an incredibly well put together team, and they have recreated the same editorial model that we have now. So I think the journal will continue to be on a successful rate because they are doing the things that have helped to set us apart in the discipline, and then will add their own uniqueness to it. But they're not taking anything away from some of the things that we've built. And I'll just quickly, if I can, talk a little bit about the Monkey Cage. So the Monkey Cage is a political analyst blog that's published in the Washington Post. It is not opinion. It is not op-ed. So that's different from most other spaces that academics can and often write in. So the Monkey Cage is a great place for you to talk about an article that you have under review, or you have, you've published, or even something that's kind of like making it through the review process, if it's based on a timely news occurrence. And it's, again, based on your analysis as a political scientist or a social scientist, not opinion. I will say we publish two types of things. So things that are most closely related to your own scholarship. So you could say, oh, right, hey, there's all this LGBTQ trans bans that are happening. I've published on this. Let me tell you what my research says. That is great, right? That's happening in the news. That's one of our straightforward things. Other things which I would encourage you all to think about more frequently are just, you are the scholar, you are an expert, right? You might not have written the article on a thing, but you know something about it because you teach students every day, right? So there might be something around at this Emmett Till anti-lynching bill that passed earlier. You might know a little bit, right? You do know a lot, right, about civil rights legislation and its failures and inabilities to make it through Congress, and what the significance of what this bill is. And so that would be just an explainer piece, right? So how you would talk to a very smart undergrad who's maybe a biology major and is not, in your intro to political science class, that doesn't know all the ins and outs, but can keep up with you. Or, right, making it familiar to how I think about it is, I'm talking to one of my family members who wants to know what I do, has like some interest in the news, but doesn't know all the political science-ness of what I do. So how would I explain it to that kind of person? Those pieces we are always looking for, and particularly from our community, because I will tell you this, others send that shit in all the time. And it's like, you haven't thought about race at all. At all. You have no idea, right? So really around like Senate discussing the filibuster, people were like, oh, I know about the filibuster because I know congressional procedure. But you haven't talked at all about how the filibuster has been weaponized for racist goals, right? And so some of this stuff was like, we just need to get our community to say, yes, all of those things are true. And right, so is living in a racist heteropatriarchal capitalist state. And I'm going to tell you about that. And those are things that you can really write. I would encourage you to write because there's just such a need. There is such a need. And I'm telling you, these white boys out here are sending us pitches on this stuff. And Chris Stout, my other American politics, we're just sending them back. Like, have you thought about gender? Have you thought about race? Have you thought about region? Right? There's all these things that these white boys just don't do and feel like they are the experts at all of this. I can't. So if you're interested in writing for the monkey cage, one of the things, so the first, usually you can write to me or Chris Stout. We are the American politics editors that would most likely be assigned to your pieces. Then send it on to the, but then send the formal pitch to the monkey cage blog at gmail.com, our official email address. But then I and Chris do that back work of telling the gatekeepers at the monkey cage, oh no, I know this person, I know this piece, right? Like I'm going to work with that. Because sometimes they'll say, oh, I don't think this fits. I don't think this is what our readers want. And then Chris and I say, no, this fits. This is what our readers want. And let me tell you what this is, right? The other thing that's useful for is, people have gotten rejected from the monkey cage. It's like a journal article, right? Like you just don't get a pitch and then you get accepted, right? But Chris and I go back in and advocate and say, no, this is a member from it. Like I did this recently with the NCOPE's monkey cage that came out on the HBCU bombing, right? That was my piece. I went back in and told the managing editor, you will publish this, right? And figure out what we need to do and we can make it work, but this has to get published. And it was rejected initially. So if you come through me or Chris first, right, like we can, I'm more comfortable throwing my weight around, I think, than Chris is, but like like our community needs to be represented in this, right? So send us an email first, letting us know that there's a heads up that you want to work on this piece or you might have questions. And I'm happy, I will share with anyone. I can probably even put it in the chat, just some how to do things for the monkey cage. So what pieces look for. And there are things that will just be kicked out if they don't have these things. So here's the author checklist, and some things might not have a news hook, but there's always happening, like racism. So like we'll take a piece that's an evergreen issue, like racism. So if there's no particular news hook that day, there will be one, right? Like eventually, or we could just say, here's some things you want to know. The other things, and I do need to run to this Western panel, but one thing I want to talk with our NCOPE's family about is in the summer, it's typically slower because academics are doing all the things, right? Playing catch up in the summer, you know how we live our lives. But that gives a real opportunity for us to run a series because there's not a lot of pitches coming in, but then we get to put our own stamp as editors on what we want to see in the monkey cage. So if NCOPE's is thinking about, we want to run a series on, here's what you need to know about Black politics, or something, we can do this. And I would really like to do that. And the last thing I'll say before I run, I know that the name monkey cage is racist and puts a lot of people off. It puts me off. We are working to change that name. It's just very, very slow. It is super slow, like way slower than I thought it was. I was like, you could call us, it's like the Washington football team. Call it the political science, analyst blog, and keep it moving until you find with the new name. But I don't run that show. So so those are the things, and I'll put my email in the chat in case you want to reach out to ask any questions, because that is the best way to reach me. But if you need it, the other way to reach me is my cell phone, and I am not the best at keeping up with that, but I will respond once I find it. All right, bye everyone. Happy NCOPE's 2022.
So Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I mentioned in the business meeting that I was going to probably say a little bit more than what I said yesterday, but I'll start off in the same place that I did last night. NCOPE's, the National Review of Black Politics is NCOPE's journal, and it only will exist if members support it. So, this is a place for you to get your work published. It's a place for NCOPE's members to read about and to cite your work, but this whole enterprise doesn't work unless people submit. And we have extra space in order to be able to publish. And so you're going to need to publish widely. So definitely submit to PGI, definitely submit to APSR, but like also submit to NRVP. And this should be a journal that is near and dear to your heart. Last year, after NCOPES, President Tiffany Willoughby-Herrard did a really good job of sending out sort of announcements telling people, hey, you should submit to the journal. That NCOPES paper that you just presented, this would actually be a good time and place for you to submit to the journal. And the thing that I thought was really kind of disconcerting. And so I want to sort of do real talk and talk about sort of like what a journal article looks like. And it looks like Nadia's back. So, once we get to the Q&A, Nadia can jump in. When you submit to a journal, even a journal about race, like you still need to bring your A game. And so what we saw was a lot of stuff that was incomplete that we had to desk reject because it just was nowhere near ready for publication. And so let me just give some broad examples of the types of things that you shouldn't do. And I'm not trying to pinpoint or indict anybody. If you do stuff with convenient samples, it's one thing if it's an experiment where we could talk about the limitations of generalizability, but you can make a causal inference from it. But yeah, you can't say anything generalizable from a survey standpoint with anything that like hasn't gone through some type of randomization, some type of raking, anything to kind of make it look like that. So like, be careful of that. Our essays are usually in the 8,000 word range. So don't give me anything less than 2,000 because I got that last year. These are academic quality pieces. And so that means that you are engaging with a number of different articles. So even if you're doing a deep text analysis or if your work is political theory, right, I shouldn't see fewer than 10 bibliographic citations, like, in your piece. Like this is stuff that is not going to put you in the best light professionally. And this isn't something that we can publish in an academic journal. We have to be careful about using NRBP as a newsletter. So it's not a place to write op-eds. NRBP is also not a place where people can present or advance descriptive data with no argument, no theory around it. So regardless of sort of like, your take on behavior versus institutions, qualitative versus quantitative, empirical versus interpretivist, like there are certain standards that are going to be true across all of these pieces. So you have an argument and you present evidence to back it up. If you present a hypothesis, then you test it. So you're going to be talking about relationships between variables. If you're doing qualitative work, that's great. We publish and we welcome that. If you're doing quantitative work, in particular, presenting top line data that I could have read in the newspaper probably isn't going to go over well with the reviewers. And so there are a couple of things that we have to think about. We desk reject because we don't want to alienate our reviewers to the point that like they won't review for us again. Like that doesn't serve you well, it doesn't serve us well, which is the reason why sometimes we have to say no at the beginning. The other thing is that people expect a certain sort of different, deeper level of analysis from our readers than things that they might be able to get. And so there might be places where providing top line or univariate data is perfectly fine and acceptable, but that can't be the be all end all of the particular argument. So make sure that you're going farther. Now, I mean, there may be one exception for that. And if this is descriptive data that truly is brand new, so stuff that you collected that nobody else has collected before, and you're using this as a theory building exercise to, actually sort of say something that is new and interesting, and we can see the effort in it. There, may be some discussion of it, but again, we still have to hold to the same types of scientific standards that we would normally expect of people in our discipline, and that even Black people who are committed to racial justice are actually still going to want to advance at the same time. The other thing is that if we review or ask you to review, like, one, please say yes. And if you can't say yes, then please give us suggestions about other people to whom we could send articles to. Please turn them in, because we're trying to reduce our turnaround time. And when people take months to return articles, and I certainly have been guilty of that, that actually makes it tougher for people, especially folks who are coming up for review, to be able to get their articles in, and to, you know, fulfill the things that they need to be able to fulfill for their jobs. And the other thing is that if we give you an R&R, right, come back to it. Like, please, like, do the revisions within a couple of months and get back to us. And I think probably one other thing that I would say is that if you have an R&R from us, please finish that before you give us another one, because we can't have like all these R&Rs sitting out there, because that's stuff that I can't publish, and we have to meet certain publication deadlines in a relationship with UC-Press, which has been very, very patient with us. So I say all of that to say we want to see your work, but we want the work to reflect positively on you, because you need it to get a job or to get tenured or to get promotion. But also think about the fact that you're also representing the organization as well. And so we want NRBP to have a high impact factor, in the same way that PGI has just gotten their impact factor, in the same way that, you know, APSR and AJPS and JLP have impact factors. And we can't do that if people are not bringing their A game to the table. And I say all this to say that I know that there's excellent work being done here, and we want to publish that excellent work. So I highly encourage that. So I see Valeria is on the call. So I will turn the program over to you. So Nadia's gone, I've gone, and so we'll now turn it over to you.
Having missed the opening remarks, I feel badly about that. I just want to say that I am here as a representative for the American Political Science Review, and I wanted to extend an invitation to send the APSR your work. There is, I think, significant value in being published in the APSR, as well as certainly, I think, some challenges and some risk, and hopefully we can talk a little bit about that as well today. Sharon Wright Austin, I think, put this together, and so, but she's out of the country right now and not able to participate. And she's also a co-editor. There are 12 of us who are co-editors on the journal. We really do want to make the journal a more interesting and accessible journal for the entire discipline, and particularly as well the NCOPE scholars and women and others who have felt perhaps, well, not perhaps, but who have had difficulty in the past, even getting a second look, like getting beyond submission, so getting beyond the desk reject. Certainly we still do desk reject papers. APSR has a 5%, maybe a 6% acceptance rate, so it's pretty difficult to get in it. We have a somewhat different process now. We actually hope that the kinds of comments that we get from reviewers actually improve work, so that, and we do try to get it turned around in 4 to 6 weeks. That doesn't always happen, but we do try to move quickly in getting responses back. And so if you have work that you think would be of interest to the broader discipline in meaningful ways, if you have new data, new approaches, new questions, if you have something novel to say, then the APSR might be the venue for your work, and we would certainly like to consider it. In our desk reject process, it takes 2 co-editors or associate editors to agree. So no paper is simply desk rejected by just by a single person. And so that should also give some reassurance. We're trying to publish in areas that might not have had a lot of space in the journal. Previously, we are also publishing research notes. And so these are opportunities to publish on a kind of interesting finding or theory or concept or approach that would again be of interest to the broader discipline or that we ought to pay attention to. They are shorter. I think they're about 4,000 words, whereas the journal articles are closer to 10, so more than twice that. And so these are some things to keep in mind. We're going through additional steps to ensure that data was collected ethically, that subjects are treated in an ethical manner, that analysis is transparent and clear, that the kinds of conclusions that scholars make are shown, their models are shown if they're doing quantitative or other kind of work, and that the appendices are available. And we're trying to be robust in our approach with that. If it feels like a hurdle, then there are certainly ways that the journal editors can perhaps be of some support. One of the things that Sharon and I talked about, having had a difficult year, I'll put this on the table, that oftentimes scholars of color, Black scholars in particular, men and women, it appears that we are being targeted when our work is published in top journals. And I don't say that to take anything away from other highly reputable journals. I was a co-editor on PGI as well, and I have published papers in the National Black Political Science Review or National Review of Black Politics, and so I want us to. But there's a kind of it seems to me that there is an effort of attack. And you all might have some other kinds of views, maybe to perfect the work of Black scholars in particular. And so one thing that we might need to consider are strategic ways to fortify ourselves against that, those efforts. Maybe a brain trust where we can come together and do our own internal reviews as we are moving through publication, or something strategic that will actually help us to do that. And that's certainly something that Sharon and I have talked about with some others. Anyway, that is a kind of start. I'm happy to answer any questions or and continue. Jonathan, I don't know if you've spoken already, and I don't know what kind of conversation you want to be able to have, but I wanted to invite you into the conversation if you're open, because you have published in the journal, and you have perhaps some perspectives that could be instructive to this group. And so I welcome you to kind of contribute. And I thank you for working through the kind of challenges with both our process and us, and the ways that we can work with editors and also be very much and rightly concerned about the institutions that editors represent and the kind of racial and gender dynamics that we might encounter. So Jonathan, I'll open the floor in whatever way you'd like to contribute.
Sure. Thank you, Valeria, for giving such a great background on the APSR and what they've been doing. Also, to the rest of the panelists as well. Nadia gave such a great detailed background on what PGI is doing. And I remember when PGI first started when I was in graduate school, and to see what it was. I think, Valeria, you were one of the first editors, I believe, of PGI.
Right. Nadia and I were the second set of editors at Purdue. And we started this journey towards the impact factor. So woohoo, Woo, this is good news, but yeah. And so hopefully everybody will be publishing there too.
Yeah, to see PGI now as one of the leading journals in the field in such a short amount of time is incredible. And also to Andra, the work that you've been doing with the National Review is amazing too. That journal has arguably what the deepest tradition within the NCOPS community. And so, you know, all of these journals, being able to have a conversation about the National Review, PGI, and APSR all at once is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. As well as conversations that Nadia introduced about publishing in the Monkey Cage, which I remember when the Monkey Cage first started, and I remember one of the editors before Nadia joined the team gathered around a bunch of us at APSA asking us like why Black people don't submit to the Monkey Cage. And we're just like, there's nothing that suggests that we should. But Nadia has come on to the scene and completely changed the dynamic and the conversation around the acceptance of our work in that space. So I think I want to give her flowers for that as well. But going to the APSR situation, so I recently published a piece in the APSR this past year, and it was great and relatively smooth, but then also came with some challenges. So I had a paper, so I actually sent it to JLP first, and it was a split decision between the reviewers, and then the editor went in and reviewed it himself and ultimately decided like, this is good, I like this, but I do see some of the concerns raised by some of the reviewers, so I'm just gonna like reject it, but I'm sure you'll publish it elsewhere. And so, but they gave me great comments, and so I took the feedback, made some changes, and then I sent it to APSR. I still, you know, you just don't think you're gonna publish at APSR, so you just still kind of send it and you just move on about your life. And so then when I saw that, when I got the reviews back, and the reviewers actually, I mean, they were really, you know, it's not, the reviewers were very intense. You know, they gave very scrupulous feedback, but they were willing to move the project forward. And so after a couple of rounds, it ultimately moves forward to publication. And then it actually comes out and it feels great. And it actually the article came out actually the day, I think it was the same day my daughter was born, my first daughter. So so it was like just like this special moment. And then afterwards, I started to also experience the negative side of publishing in APSR, which is like some of the attacks that come along with publishing in that journal. There's one in particular who, oh, thank you, Andra. Yeah, who came in, wanted to like try to go fine tooth comb through the work and like highlight like some issues or some issues that this person had with the paper, and try to like go on what became kind of a discrediting spree to just undermine the credibility of my paper and my work. And like, I'm releasing the data, I'm releasing the code, I'm being very open and transparent about the situation, and happy to acknowledge any issues. But again, there was this clear effort to sort of undermine and discredit the work. And so but I'm still fine with that, because that's what being Black in graduate school was everything I did. There was always people trying to discredit it. But it reached a level where I wasn't quite sure that the APSR was being supportive. And if it weren't for Valeria and Sharon, I don't know, like that article might have been retracted, or, you know, or I would have actually probably just retracted the piece, because like, it was so frustrating to be so like consistently attacked when you felt like you were doing everything that you were supposed to do. I mean, I built the study from the ground up. It was the idea, IRB, I created the survey. Like, this is all me. This is not a paper with like 4 or 5 authors that I see a lot of these white guys do. So it was just like really kind of hurtful and offensive that especially someone senior would attack me as someone junior trying to get tenure at a place like Brown, knowing the challenge that in itself holds. So, but again, Valeria and Sharon stepped in and mitigated the situation. They came up with a plan. They coached me through it. They got the APSR editors to develop a plan to actually like support me in the situation. And I'm telling you, if it were not for those two, I think the outcome would have been very different. And I'm just glad that we have folks like that sitting on those boards, because I understand now why we weren't publishing in APSR before. It's not because of the quality of our work or anything related to anything remotely close to merit. It's just about, if you don't have folks like that on the inside that are advocating for us, you can forget about it, because the second that they can find any small thing that they can use to undermine the credibility of our work, they'll do it.
Thank you, Jonathan. That, I think it's just being so vulnerable, right? And sharing what you went through and knowing, and I hope to share with you that you are not alone, right? This doesn't make it feel any better because it was shitty what happened to you, right? And I am so thankful that Sharon and Valeria were there to help shepherd you through the process. But like, this happens to us. It happens to queer folk. It happens to women, right? Who are publishing in places or doing research that these folks don't like. You're not alone. It doesn't make it any better, right? But I just want you to know that they're doing this all over the place. I even had one of those trolls write me and ask me for a letter to put in his merit file that said that he was doing service to the discipline by catching the authors had interpreted the binary variables opposite, right? And he was like, I caught this for you guys, and you need to write a letter for my chair. Like, no, sir, that ain't happening, right? But so this is what I was saying kind of in the chat, right? I do think there is room for, as you were saying, like, for senior people to take this up, right? Because you're doing what you need to do, right? And others are as well, right? They're putting their heads down and they're trying to write and get the best publication that they possibly can so they can get tenure. And then when you get tenured, now you join us on the other side and you start to fight for the others, right? But I do think that there is, I mean, I don't know what this would be, right? I was kind of kicking around thinking through this, because I know that this happens at journals like PGI, where, you know, or I know this has also happened at the International Feminist Politics Review, or whatever the name of that journal is. So people are just looking for trolls, but it's happening at the APSR too, right? And I think that, you know, we're not alone, the editors, and so we should be able to come up with a strategy to how we all collectively respond to these people, because it's not just one journal, but it is one particular kind of troll, right? And that's the thing. So if you're publishing this, no matter where you went, these kind of people will follow. And I don't know what that looks like. Valeria, you have your hand up, so maybe you do. And this is the thing, the grad students at Purdue used to call us peanut butter and jelly. So like, I'd come up with something that Valeria would tag team it and come back up. So I'm sure she has some fire along the same lines, where I'm like, here's the problem, and Valeria gonna come in here with the solution. So
Go
ahead,
Nadia.
No,
Finish. Oh.
Yeah, go.
Well, we haven't seen each other in a minute, and we do tag team. So, but it was just making me think. I think that there's. I don't want this to take over this conversation. So this, but if we could spend just a few minutes here, I think there's two streams to this. One is, how do editors respond to this? Because it is our responsibility, and I think, at least in some ways, to the extent that we can, we need to, in my approach, is that we protect our authors, right? When the people who we publish we are responsible for. If we publish them, then that is the work that we do and we vouch for it. And so we protect them. It doesn't mean that there can be errors all over the place, but that's not the kind of work that any of you all are doing. And so honest mistakes, if people were really doing good work, when others caught honest mistakes, they would pull your coattails, they would pull you aside, they would whisper in your ear, they would give you some suggestions. They would not go public in order to undermine the work that you do if they had value for it. And so this is something else, and there is this kind of a trolling approach. So one is, I think, what can editors do? The other thing is, how can we help ourselves on the other side? And so I would like for us, and again, maybe this is not the right venue for this, but I want us to think critically and thoughtfully about putting together a brain trust, about making sure that we are doing what we can to say, hey, pass this around, make sure this is tight. What do you think? But we have to be able to trust each other and have support in order to do that. And so that's a different kind of muscle to build. One last thing I wanted to say is that part of this is that open science movement. I'm not defaming it, but I know it is rushing through, and I know, because we've done it with DART, right? So these things look innocuous, but they are not. So that data, I can't even remember, replication, and transparency, those things are important, but they're also designed to eliminate access to certain kinds of people or certain kinds of questions, I think. But it is presented as if it is neutral. And it is really presented as if the only kinds of things that matter are causal, and there's a particular way that the scientific enterprise is moving. And they did it in psychology first, and people made their names by tearing down other people in these famous studies. And so that is part of what's driving us in political science, I think, except I don't know whether they're going after kind of these big whatever. I know that they're going after groups individuals who they think don't belong. That I'm clear on. So anyway, Andrea.
So I'll just add one thing to this. I mean, part of it is pedagogical. And so some people are learning to train on this, like when you did replication studies in a stats class to kind of learn methods and to understand what people did and what people didn't do, right? There is a value added to that. And I'm not anti-methods. And I understand that some people are methodologists within the field, and it's their job to kind of tell us how to make the math better. That part I respect, but it's now kind of metastasized. So at least as far as data transparency is concerned, nothing about open science is going to prevent somebody from outright making up data. So like the Mike LeCur problem, and I'm going to say his name because this is where this all started, right? Could do the exact same thing today with open science and get away with it unless somebody else catches it or demands the seeds or sort of the actual data. So there's that issue. And then there's also the larger issue of when people get very fixated on the math. I think this is an epistemological issue. It's, well, what does your methodological intervention sort of teach me substantively about what's going on? And I think that's the thing that we hit back on, because a lot of times people are so fixated on your mathematical sort of estimate is not precise, and I can get it precise by 1/10 of a unit. And it's like, but you told me the exact same thing that somebody else knew before. And so while I appreciate the sort of methodological improvement, you don't have a story to tell me. Or kind of in the words of Paula McLean, I've sort of taken this from it, you get all teched up with nowhere to go. So there are lots of people who know all kinds of math, don't know beans about politics. And so when they apply it, they end up like saying and doing really dumb stuff. And so at the end of the day, I think most of us care about the substantive questions. And so that's what we tend to focus on. And yes, I think we have to make sure that like we're doing the math correctly. But at the end of the day, we're doing this, one, because we care, but two, because there's this really important story to tell. And oftentimes sometimes these people have lots of formulas, but they don't necessarily have a story that's actually compelling at all or can explain anything that's going on in the world, depending on what types of assumptions that they're using. So, you know, I think this is a larger thing that we're going to have to deal with in the discipline. I see Kim Neely's on the call. So if you could take our concerns, like, you know, back to APSA and let us know sort of, you know, how we can contribute to that type of discussion. But like, you know, we are where we are in, you know, at this particular moment. And so, you know, I agree that we have to stick together and figure out sort of how to you know, confront this and deal with it head on.
Well, I just want to add to that, Andra, that little 10th of a point, it's not only that, it's that they don't even have to publish, right? So it used to be that if you have a critique of an article, then you write your own and you tell a different story. All this is a critique that is not published. It's just online someplace or on Twitter, and it does the work without having to make any other effort to actually engage the other scholar in a meaningful way. And so I think that is also something people are getting by with this in ways that are not useful and doesn't change the substantive outcomes that the scholars have either. So yes, we need to figure out a path for it. Anyway, I'm done. That's a soapbox, but we need to come up with a brain trust approach or something. Let's give it some thought.
So Nadia's noted that we have about 13 minutes for questions. Anybody have questions? And I know Pearl Dow, my co-editor, is on the call, so I don't know if she can unmute her screen, but she's also here to answer questions as well.
Hey, Pearl. So there's
hey,
questions.
I'm not dressed appropriate. It's Friday and Girl Scout time and all that, so I'm here.
So I do see a question from Tari. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and then one from Kim Neely. So please apologize if I mispronounced your name.
No apologies needed. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here. My name's Tari Ajadi. I'm a PhD candidate at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, and a pre-doctoral fellow in Black Studies at Queen's University. But enough of the throat clearing. I'm just really curious. Generally speaking, obviously, I'm British, but I come from Canadian institutions, and I'm trying to figure out, I would love to publish, for example, in the National Review of Black Politics. I'd love to publish in PGI. I get very concerned and tentative about it, though, because I feel as if, well, doing Canadian politics, there might not be necessarily that kind of resonance or relevancy. And I'm just curious if you've got any notes for someone who's publishing about Canada in any of these spaces, whether or not, I don't know, I guess, like, number one, is it interesting or relevant to have interpretive studies of urban politics in Canada in one of these spaces? Is that something that you'd like? Okay, that's good for me to know, because I guess I just kind of figured, well, maybe that's just not relevant, you know, some of those pieces. So I guess I just love any tips for how to kind of make my work relevant to an American audience as well, if you've got any. But I really appreciate all of the insights, and I look forward to submitting things to you folks in the future, all of you folks on the call. Thank you.
So as far as NRBP is concerned, so long as it's about Black people, we publish it, and so we probably read that as a good comparative piece. So, you know, so long as it's rigorous, like, you know, and it's about Black people, we don't care. We will review it.
And same thing for PGI. I mean, it can be broader than Black people for PGI, but we have an international advisory board. Several Canadian scholars are on that board. So we are looking to do more, actually publishing scholars from, and we have a robustness of scholars that are publishing from outside of the US on topics outside of the US. So one way in the future, as a piece of advice, I would look on to see who's on the editorial team, who's on the editorial board. If you have an international advisory board, who's on there, that kind of gives you a scope for who your article might go to when it comes in for review. And if these are people that are at least familiar in some ways with the work that you're doing, you're probably in good standing to submit your article at that journal. But yeah, we welcome it at PGI.
Thank you.
Yeah. I see Kim Neely's hand.
Hey, can I two finger on that? I'm sorry. To add to Nadia's recommendations, suggest reviewers. so that none of us are going to take every reviewer that you suggest, but we might look at one or two of them. So please suggest reviewers. And if there are people who you think shouldn't review the article, you can tell us that too. The reviewers will never know one way or the other. And so that's helpful to help us make sure that your manuscript gets delivered to the right set of eyes. So we want to give it the best shot possible.
Kim.
Thank you, Andra, and it's great seeing everyone again. I do want to thank everyone for a very informative and important panel. I am distressed to hear of the experiences that some are sharing with regards to their publication experiences and experiences with intimidation from and bullying from members of the profession. That's unacceptable. And I just wanted to make a note that I dropped a link in the chat to a new report that has come out that was written by Dr. McLean and colleagues, including Dr. Nyambi Carter, Drs. John Garcia, Kathy Cohen, and Carol Marchand, who led working groups studying inequities, systemic inequities within the profession. And one of the chapters focuses on publications and citations and how important it is for scholars of color to be cited and to be recognized for the work that they do. And when they aren't cited, that needs to be examined as to why are they not being cited? Is this a product of just being overlooked? Is it a product of their work being marginalized? Is it a product, I think someone earlier had mentioned pedagogy and training. So in graduate school, how are we trained to cite? Who are we told to cite? Who are we told are the appropriate scholars in the canon to cite? And what does that mean? And who is left out? So what are the social hierarchies that have led to individuals being excluded, namely individuals from historically underrepresented backgrounds and scholars? And what are the longer term impacts upon their careers from this kind of exclusion from citations? So I do welcome everyone to review that, to read it, to send in your comments to me and to Dr. McLean or the individuals that are that were working on it. But more importantly, I do want to offer the association as a resource for anyone who feels that they are being intimidated or being bullied. And I'm so grateful for the leadership of Valeria and her team in responding to issues like this and standing up for scholars and their right to produce and promote and showcase their scholarship. So if there are individuals who are feeling this way as well, I would definitely like to know. If it's confidential and you don't want to email me directly, you can email the APSA ethics email address or the APSA ethics point platform, where you can kind of share a concern that you have and someone will get back to you about that. But I just want to make sure that people know that this is not acceptable and that the association takes these kinds of intimidating experiences very seriously. I'm not sure what exactly the response would be, but there would be a discussion generated and individuals would be brought to bear to help to assist in any way that is acceptable by the particular scholar in question, but also just in general. So I just wanted to make myself a resource to those that are having these troubling interactions with others in the discipline.
Hi, thanks, Kim, for that comment. I just want to say, this may have been discussed, but one of the things that I know about my colleagues on this panel is that we have done I think, a very concerted effort in ensuring that our authors are broadening who they're citing. One of the things I know, particularly in doing things with Nadia and in some of the, even with some of the PS special issues I've been in, that there has been a concerted effort that we cite other people that are in that volume as well. And so I think we, as an editorial team, we are taking that seriously. And I think that's something that, you know, as you are looking to publish, that you also take it upon yourself to look at that journal and see who's published in that journal, particularly those such as PGI and NPSR, and looking at, you know, who our authors are, because many of them are just scholars like yourself, and the citations do matter. You know, I sit on a university P&T committee, and that comes up every month, index factor. And so these are just small, they seem minor, but they really do matter in our careers. Kim, thank you for pointing out that report, because that is very important. It's not just where you publish, but also those citations. And so we do take that all of us on this committee, on this panel, take that very seriously.
Thanks. Does anybody else have any questions, comments, things they want to add?
I just want to say, of course. I'm typing something, I can finish it, but I just wanted to say, I don't think it's accidental that these, that we see the emergence of these kinds of gatekeepers, just as we begin to see new journals that focus on groups that have been previously marginalized in silence, and as more women and women of color become editors in these spaces. I don't think it, and as we're moving forward to publish more voices in our journals, I don't think it's coincidental that we get these kind of militia, whatever, gatekeepers on the side, de facto gatekeepers, when they want to get around the institutions that are expanding and they want to close them down. So,
oh, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Valeria. So part of me is thinking about how, I can't think of the name of the journal now because it's not a thing I would publish in, but there's lots of us that are now moving to seeing, there was a conversation on Twitter about this other journal as being like, you know, should it replace the APSR?
Oh, it's probably political behavior. I mean, AJPS wants to make that claim all the time. And then
yes, no, it wasn't like political science. It was like in another
like science.
Maybe it was science. Maybe it was other social. But the point here is just that the need to say that y'all could have this because you have it now, right? And then we get to move on and claim some other journal is the place we want to be. Claim that APSA is doing all of this diversity and inclusion work, talking about really trying to be more inclusive. Y'all can have this, we're gonna make something else, right? And I don't think it is coincidental, right? I think that this move really has something to do with how others in the discipline are viewing us as not deserving of these things. But I don't think that should stop us, right? Like people gonna do what they're gonna do. My favorite quote from Melanie Price is that white people gonna wait. And that is just like this, that's what it is. But we should decide how we deal with that in-house, right? So as Valeria was saying, is it a Black brain trust? Is it, you know, we know that white boys get together and have funding to read each other's papers over the summer. Then they decide when they're going to submit it and who's going to co-author and then who's going to be put down as a reviewer. We know that's what happens. We should have something similar. We should have it for our own journals and other things. I know we're at 4 o'clock, so I'll stop talking.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I will say is that there are certain things that I don't mind people doing, but then there are also some things that are just straight up unethical. Yeah, and unethical. So I want us, yeah. So you know, I want that to be exposed, you know, for what it is, and I want us to come up with a way to do it where we can all maintain our integrity. Because oftentimes the reason why we've been held back is we didn't cheat. And so, you know, and there I'm kind of willing to go down or to be viewed sort of less favorably because I didn't like take advantage of some stuff. But like there were certain things I remember 1 year as a section chair for APSA. It was the year of the New Orleans conference that got canceled because of Hurricane Isaac. And we asked people to submit paper awards. And so people were submitting their own papers, and we got one submission, and one of the committee members pointed out that wasn't actually even in our section. And I was just like, that was real ballsy. Okay. And so it was a good thing that like somebody was paying attention to what was going on. I can't like, and I don't think that that's ethical. There are certain things where I'm like, I'm not necessarily mad at people for trying certain things, like when people worked together in ways, but like when you work together and write a paper and then like don't actually put your name on it to review it, right? That's going too far.
Yeah. All right, so we've come to the end of our time together. If there are questions that we did not answer, I'd like for all the editors to please put their email addresses in the chat now so that people will have access to them. If you think of questions later on, we are all happy to answer questions, because most of what we know is that there is a formula of journal writing. There is a formula for sending things out to review. And some of these things are opaque if you are new to the publishing process. So we can ethically help you by giving you some just basic guidelines of what to submit, how to submit, make sure you get the, your friends and your mentors to read your work and the like. So we can do all of that. So if we didn't answer all those things at this point, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you, NCOPES, again, for being a constant place for us to get together as family and talk about these issues in a place that is supportive, encouraging, allows us just to be us. Oh, I didn't take it that way, Andra. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Email me.